go ahead and get started. It's 12:02. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the latest edition in NUFIC's Pub Talk series. NUFIC is the Northeast Washington Forest Coalition, and we're one of many forest collaboratives that work with the Forest Service to help advise on management of the Colville National Forest here in Northeast Washington. And before I forget, just wanted to mention that this Pub Talk is supported in part by a grant from the Washington Department of Natural Resources, the Building Forest Partnerships Grant. So thank you very much to DNR for that. And I am Gina Clays. I'm the NUFIC facilitator and coordinator. And today we'll be sitting down with Kurtis Vaagen and Bobby Whittaker to talk about the new Heritage Legislative Initiative. So that's Northeast Washington Heritage Legislative Initiative. And so to introduce our speakers, Kurtis Vaagen is the NUFIC board president and vice president of operations for Vaagen Brothers Lumber. He's a third generation sawmiller born and raised in Colville. And also we have Bobby Whittaker. He is a NUFIC board member and recreation liaison. And he's also president of the Ferry County Rail Trail Partners. And he also spent over 30 years in the music industry. So take it away, Kurtis and Bobby. Thank you.
Thanks, Gina. So I think Bobby and I were both planning on filling at least 20 minutes with our introductions to slow roll this out, but I think you did a really good job at making sure everybody knows who we are and what we do and kind of where we come from. A little to add on to a little bit of my introduction. So born and raised in Colville, my family has been in the sawmill industry for, like Gina said, three generations. So my great grandfather had a one-man show out there, out Tiger Highway, about 15 miles. And it's kind of where it all started. So when my grandfather came back from the war, it was time to get to work. And he started Vaagen Brothers with his brother. So a little bit of a history lesson on where I come from. I'm living the dream of my grandfather and great grandfather, but now we're based 15 miles to the west in Colville, Washington. We have facilities in Usk, Washington, which is just north of Newport on the Idaho border, and then another operation in Midway, BC. So I get to see the good, bad, and the ugly of the difference between the U.S. forestry sector and the BC. So I'd like to say I have a wealth of knowledge, but I have a lot to learn. And actually just sticking around these folks within NUFIC and Bobby, Gina, and the rest of the gang has really taught me a lot on what I don't know. So I'll let Bobby kind of introduce himself a little bit, and we'll just kind of go through what we wanted to talk about today, and then we'll have some questions at the end, and we'll see what we can do about answering those.
Thanks, Kurtis. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming and spending your lunch hour with us. It's going to be fairly loose and casual here. That's our style. The Kurtis and Bob comedy duo. Let's say, Kurtis, I was going to say, did you touch on it? Did I miss it? Because I often miss things. Did you mention that your sawmill is family owned, or it's the only independent in Washington? What is that actual sentence I'm trying to say?
Well, so we were one of the smallest family-owned sawmills in our working circle. So you had other sawmills that were a lot bigger than us at the kind of the turn of the century and through the entire 1900s. We were able to make our niche within the marketplace by specializing in small logs, and which kind of turned into like this restoration thinning process. And it really gave us the ability to grow and expand where almost all family-owned businesses within this industry really don't exist unless you're a 5-man crew running an old school circular saw, making specialty products, which we do have a few locally, which like the Webleys based out of Colville, right. And I think Smiley in Medaling Falls. So that's kind of where everybody got their start. We're one of the only family-owned businesses that can compete with a large corporation. So it's a very different situation when we talk about restoration timber management, because being a homesteader, basically, I mean, my great grandparents are homesteaders. So it's not like we're sitting in a boardroom picking mountains to go log and bring that material into the woods. So it's completely different. A family-owned business in this business doesn't really exist, at least on the scale that we're at. And we kind of had to grow to keep up with the industry needs and actually buy Forest Service wood. So
yeah, okay. Well, that's very rock and roll to me, and pretty cool. And we want to keep the logs flowing to your yard and whatnot. And that's one of the reasons that I got involved with NUFIC, Northeast Washington Forest Coalition, was because of that story that Kurtis just hit on there that I made him tell us a little more about. My name is Bobby Whittaker. I'm president of the Ferry County Rail Trail Partners. I'm also on the Republic Skate Park Committee. I'm also about to unveil an effort on the reservation in Inchelium for an Inchelium skate park, which is exciting. I love giving back to community. I love getting people outdoors. These lowland trails and skate parks and things like that, I refer to them as gateway drugs. They get people. It's an entry level. It's real easy. You don't need uniforms or teams. You don't need an avalanche beacon or a GPS to find anything. So I really like working on those lowland projects. I expanded my mission to go up into the Colville National Forest because I saw so much cool work going on. I'm a recreation advocate. I'm a public land advocate. I like to say it's your waterfront or trail or skate park as much as it is mine. And so I saw an opportunity to promote and or advocate for recreation inside the Northeast Forestry Coalition. And I've been doing that for a few years. Gina mentioned briefly that I was in the music business for 30 years or something like that. So I still have some tendrils in that, but I'm loving not being on tour during the pandemic, which is not happening. I'm loving living in Northeast Washington and Ferry County in particular. I love it. I actually made some bumper stickers about 10 years ago that say I heart Ferry County. And it's true. I think that we touched briefly on Northeast Washington Forestry Coalition. We've got to talk about the foundation of New Heritage a little bit. I want to say I joined Northeast Washington Forestry Coalition maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, something like that. I was at a camp out on Jungle Hill up on the Kettle Crest, and I think it was your dad, Kurtis, that showed up at it. And it was all the hippie environmentalists, and then they were like, "Oh yeah, there's the logger guys over there." I was like, "What?" Like, it just blew my mind. I was like, "That's so cool! Like, that is amazing." They're here at this like conservation recreation camp out, and I was like, I was hooked from that point forward. And then I started learning more and more about everything, and I got more into it. So I really wanted to be part of that group. I like working outside of the bubble. I like working with people that don't think exactly like myself. And that's really happening in NUFIC, and it's been happening for roughly 20 years, I think. There's a 20-year anniversary coming up. And so NUFIC kind of came about briefly because of the timber wars and conservation not talking to the timber companies. Everyone was at odds with the Forest Service. NUFIC came together, and those timber wars ended, and forestry started getting better and better and better because Vaagen thinking outside the box, conservation thinking outside the box. I feel like maybe there should have been a little bit more of a team effort or focus of recreation inside that early inception. I know Derek Knowles was there for some of that, and he's great, but that's sort of why I showed up to the party. And NUFIC has helped the Forest Service set the pace and scale records. They just got an award last year or something like that for pace and scale in the Colville National Forest. #1 producing timber board feed or something to that effect. I don't know the actual details, but I think it's #1 in Region 6 which is huge. There's a lot of big forests and a lot of rain in other forests. And for us to hit that mark, but it's dovetailed with good forestry that is making a healthy. Go ahead, Curtis. I see your hand going up.
That's just, I mean,
Yep.
I'm just nodding with you there. I mean, to be able to hit those volumes with the style of these projects is what's the most impressive. So you don't go out there in 5 years after a project and say, oh my goodness, the bomb went off here.
Right.
And there are units here and there that we haven't agreed upon what the result looked like, but in general, we've been very happy with what a unit looks like after you bring that fire back in, and it's just an unbelievable stand. So to hit that volume on this small of a national forest system and to have the project look as good as it does, it's just a magical thing that the conservation groups, the timber industry, and the Forest Service have all kind of changed their way of thinking compared to the 60s, 70s, and 80s when I've done a lot of aerial flights over the Kettle Crest looking at beetle kill areas and other things over the tribe. And the difference in the cutting patterns now from what it was 30 years ago is shocking. And honestly, it's hard to find them from an aerial view. So it's just completely different. And it's something that I think all of us are proud to be a part of.
And yeah, and that's exciting. That came from the collaboration of conservation and the timber industry working together, and the public, the private sector influencing the Forest Service. And so it's like the concept is, wow, that worked really well. And how do we take it up a notch, take it to the next level? NewFick's about to celebrate its 20-year anniversary, and hitting these records and having forestry be way better, and having conservation folks liking the forest treatments is a really exciting thing. One other thing I'll add to this, because I'm a recreation dork, those timber sales that we're talking about that help set the pace and scale records for the Colville National Forest, there's money that has to stay legally, technically, from those timber sales and go back towards projects that help with stream sediment, roads, and that's semi-recently, in the last few years, been expanded to include recreational trails. So what you're talking about is setting the pace and scale. Now, it's not only getting the forest more healthy, we're all of a sudden building up a bank account for money that can be used on recreation. And that's sort of new. And so I love that. That's amazing. I see Jeff Kish is on here for the Pacific Northwest Trail Association. I think that we got them $220,000 from retained receipts a couple of years ago, which is, thank you, Jeff. And so here we are, everyone coming together, working with our partners, doing log out, fixing tread, fixing washouts, keeping recreation going. And that also helps our recreation economy. Anyhow, so that's a real win-win thing that I just want to mention about those retained receipts. So what do we do for an encore? New heritage. I think that's where Kurtis and I are, where we want to start leaning. And Kurtis, I'm gonna let you talk a little bit, and then I'll pick up some slack when you get blue in the face.
Yeah, no worries. I just kind of figured, we went through quite a bit of history and why we're here and kind of what's next. And this is kind of the flashy thing that we're all looking at because to us, this is where, we've dealt with collaborating so much on forest restoration projects. And it's been such a successful thing for us personally and the forest. So how do we expand it? That's always been one of the hardest things for us to understand is why isn't everybody here? And it came to the realization that, forest restoration projects are great, but not everybody uses them. So why would they come to I mean, sometimes I see Bobby's eyes glaze over in some of these meetings because we're forestry, and we love it. But some of these
you
folks,
have no idea how much I've heard about 21-inch trees, you guys.
But in reality, it's just it's not something that excites everybody. It excites me because it's our family business, and I've kind of grown up within. I mean, I didn't know that my dad was grooming me at the age of 5 when he's taking me to these timber sales and letting me walk out into the woods and get lost and going and finding me and just kind of showing me the history of what the industry has gone through. So how do we get everybody excited? And that's kind of what I think New Heritage is okay, we want to really come at this a different way with legislation so that we can get more user groups active in the planning process, active in sharing what they want, some of the needs and desires of who they represent, and how do we put that on paper in such a format that anybody that reads it says, well, this is fantastic, sign me up, how do I get involved? And that's really what we're what we're trying to do. When this began, it was kind of okay, how do we package this? Who are we selling it to? Which politicians are going to take this football and run with it? And one of the comments early on was, we don't want a partisan bill or legislation that we're trying to propose. We want this to be so bipartisan that because the forest doesn't care if you're a Democrat or Republican, it just wants to live and breathe and be healthy. So how do we make sure that this is something that doesn't have a political bias, and you can get CMR's office along with some Democrats as well that just say, you know, this is one of those things that everybody should want. CMR
is Kathy with Morris Rogers, everybody. We just try to abbreviate that.
Sorry about that. I get a little wrapped around the wheel when I start talking politics. So yeah. But that was one of the biggest things to me was, how do we package this that if the political winds shift and we haven't completely finished everything that we're looking for, how does it go to the next politician that may or may not have been elected, so it doesn't die a quick death because there's a political wind shift? Because the industry needs to be healthy for the forest, and the forest needs the industry to be healthy at the same time. And that goes to all the recreation and all the other interests as well. The better we treat these national forests for forever it's very important to the forest. So what New Heritage kind of means to me is, how do we get more interests to the table, and how do we permanently protect these interests and recognize every user group that we can that's interested in participating? Because one of the feelings that I get is I hear the strike while the iron is hot every once in a while, but to me it's kind of strike while you're up to bat. I don't want to be sitting here 20 years from now with a new group of players that I don't really share a lot of the same values with, and they're moving this ball in a completely different direction. I would really enjoy working with the folks that we're working with now, the leadership on the forest, and then bringing in new user groups. And I think Bobby's definitely going to talk about the tribal concept or tribal portion of this, because it's just so important. There's just so many user groups that aren't coming to the table now, and they're advocating for themselves. They're not advocating for each other. When I sit here and I talk about Bobby's interests, it has a little more weight to it than when he speaks about it, because he's a recreational guy. When Bobby sits there and tells his folks about the groups that he represents about timber, I mean, that's a different conversation that he can have with them. And if I were to go talk to them, they'd say, oh yeah, I know where you're coming from. And I totally understand that. And that's something that I think New Heritage has the ability to bring these groups together because we're advocating for a lot of the same things and we're advocating for each other. So, Bobby, I've probably spoke enough. I mean, there's probably some other things that I missed.
I wanted to chime in real quick. I like the handoff here. I wanted to say I might have missed a step, or maybe we should explain one other thing. You know, Kurtis and I are sitting here. The pace and scale records are being set. The forest is getting healthier. We're all excited. All of that could go away. It could all change. There's nothing permanent about this. So the Forest Service worked on a plan. It's a 20-year plan. They worked on it for 15 years or something like that. They got a lot of input, and that exists. They made that plan official a couple of years ago, and that plan has a limited reach. It's finite and it is time sensitive. They're required by law to update that plan. Everything could change the next time they update it. Everything can change the next time we get a new forest supervisor, or Rodney Smolden, who's a forest supervisor now, retires or changes his mind. There's no assurances. Like, you start to get scared. You're sitting in these meetings going, well, you know, and I've worked in a lot of industries where I worry about variables. And I think about the variable of this is not acceptable. And the plan isn't meant to deal with those variables. The plan is a temporary working solution. And the concept is New Heritage can go and build on that plan. So the Forest Service took a lot of time and effort and money and official federal effort to digest the community input. A lot of that's in the plan, but that can all change. So what we're talking about is augmenting that plan and getting more input from the community and doing more than is expected of the plan. And we're not trying to go over the helmet of the Forest Service here. We're trying to build on it and do something that the plan's not intended to do. So when Kurtis is talking about that, that's why we're here, sort of the sense of urgency, I guess. And that requires what we're talking about requires legislation. And that requires our commissioners being on board, our tribes and neighbors being on board, our community being on board, our user groups being on board. And so we're trying to come up with something. We haven't baked the cake yet. That's why everyone's here, why we're doing outreach. But we're trying to come up with something called New Heritage that includes assurances for everybody: recreation, existing industries like ranching, timber, and try to set something that we can all agree on, some positives that we can all agree on, and make it permanent, get it legislated. One of the things that I think is missing from that plan and missing from the Colville Forest in general is the tribal voice, tribal presence. I know when I moved to Ferry County 20-something years ago, I had no idea that the north half of Ferry County used to be reservation until we found gold, moved the tribes off of there. So I learned about that through my work with the tribes and the Ferry County Rail Trail. To me, I see an opportunity for us to do way, way better and include in this legislation a cultural component and get the tribes at the table. I think it was Kristen from the Pacific Northwest Trail Association who said it really well. Said, you know, no one eats at the dinner table until the tribes are at the table. And for me, that's super important and super key. I'll just use as an example. When we go over Sherman Pass is named after General Sherman, who's credited with sort of a scorched earth effort. He was the one credited with killing buffalo, killing food source, the Indians, and he's never been over Sherman Pass. So here we have Sherman Pass, Sherman Wildlife Rec Area, Sherman Creek, and he's never been over Sherman Pass. What if we took one of those, Sherman Creek, for instance? We just recently found the traditional name for that. What if we changed Sherman Creek, or added a second name, the original name and place of Sherman Creek, the tribal name, which is Sinaiks, I believe, or Lakes, from the Lakes Band, which is this is their traditional territory. So we could do something like that. And that would take legislation, and that would be exciting. Also, you know, I think that this is an opportunity to work very closely with tribal government and the county commissioners to see what they want to do in addition to the forest plan. what are the permanent assurances they want, and actually have them have a say in the management and the writing of this bill, which is exciting to me, very exciting. And so Kurtis and I and couple other members of Northeast Washington Forest Coalition have been meeting with people from the Kalispell and the 12 Confederated tribes, the Colville. We've been meeting with Upper Columbia United Tribes over the last 8 or 9 months, I think, roughly. We've been going to these beautiful, meaningful, historic places that are culturally significant to the tribes, and having these meetings outside. And it's been really informative for me and Kurtis. And we listen a lot at these meetings, so for me, I get really excited about being able to include them in this legislation. It's not just forestry, it's not just recreation, it's cultural, and we've got a real good opportunity to make a really well-rounded piece of legislation here.
Yeah, if I could just add to your tribal component real quick, Bobby, is I don't want to confuse this. I think we got a little wrapped around the wheel last time as far as the meetings that we did with the tribal folks weren't to say that, we have tribal support. What it is for us to sit down and understand if this is a movement that at some point they could support. So we're not saying, okay, we met with the tribe, now we're moving forward. Basically, we wanted to know, okay, if we move this forward, is this something that they can support? Because Bobby mentioned earlier, nobody eats until the tribe's at the table. A lot of this land was historically tribal land. That's why we have 2 active Tribal Forest Protection Act forestry projects, restoration projects on the Colville National Forest, one from the Kalispell tribe and the other from the Colville Confederated tribe. So working with the tribe is important because technically we're trying to legislate in an area that has so much tribal history and cultural elements that Bobby and I would never, in a million years, if we just sat here and listened to each tribal member, we wouldn't be able to catch up on the cultural significance of a lot of these areas. We take a lot of them for granted because they're either public land or private property, homesteaders. So it's something that is important to us, that if we're going to move this forward and the tribes at that point said, no, we don't want any part of this, then there really wouldn't be any reason for us to work on this. So that was kind of our first step, okay, if we do this, what do we need to do to garner the support of the tribe so that there's a larger voice? And I think that's what we set out to do. And I think we've accomplished that. Obviously, we're not saying that this is, like Bobby says, we're not handing you guys a baked cake. We're garnering ideas. We're trying to get input. We're taking this map that we have and saying, poke some holes in it. Where do you want to go? What's significant to your user group? And we wanted to start with that tribal element so that we understood if a user group, say the Pacific Northwest Trail, said, we need to come right down through this portion of the Kettle River. Okay, well, the Colvilles say that in their history books that this portion is a very historic site for their gathering. I know they have some sites where they had some powwows. I guess that's kind of what they call them now, but in some of these areas that the Pacific Northwest Trail goes really close to. So those are things that we need to be sensitive to when we move forward, so that we kind of understand when we're meeting with other folks that we can kind of steer this direction so that we don't trip ourselves up in 6 to 8 months or even years, if that's how long this takes. I think we're willing to put in all the hard work and keep pushing it. But if we were to not understand that to begin with, I think we would be setting ourselves up for failure. I know we didn't do all the outreach that we could have and should get done, but we're not even close to finishing this outreach. And this is kind of what these pub talks are. I really wish we could be sitting around one of our local brew pubs here and having adult sodas or wobbly pops.
I think there'll be lots of time for that. Like, we're just getting started, I think. Kurtis, I can't believe you talked about a hiking trail. You're supposed to be talking about ATVs and stuff like that.
I hike just very slowly.
And so that's just a random example. The example I used of Sherman Pass as an example, that's not the tribe talking, that was me talking. Like we said, we are saying, what do you want in this legislation? And let's rock. And we haven't gone before business councils. We've been talking to people in Fish and Wildlife. We've been talking independently to council members, the business council. We've been talking to cultural, the head of cultural departments and stuff like that. So we're just getting warmed up, and we're just starting the dialogue here on all fronts, really. That's all I wanted to add to that. I think Gina is sharing the map that we have right now. This map, I don't think, so this is the Colville National Forest, which is supersized from 1.2 million acres to 1.5 million acres now. Is that right, Kurtis? Am I on there? And we've just highlighted the forest, and then we've highlighted some areas of importance. And we didn't specify that they should be any certain designation. There's a lot of wiggle room there. We want to see what everyone wants, what everyone's comfortable with, what they like. But it's just to kind of get us started talking about a lot of roadless areas, a lot of really key recreation areas, some very culturally significant areas. And so we're hoping people don't get defensive at this map or the concept of new heritage as a whole, really. Anything you want to add to that, Kurtis, there?
But I think the only thing that I would add is I don't know where people on this call come from, what their interests are, and how much experience they have on the Colville National Forest. But the Colville National Forest is extremely diverse as far as you go from really almost the 1310 line is what we call the line on the National Park Service boundary on the Columbia River. And then you go all the way up to some of these higher peaks that are knocking at the 6,000 foot level. So the amount of diversity that we have on the Colville National Forest is absolutely amazing. I think I was trying to show in my background, just behind my ugly head here, you can see the Kettle Crest. I'm all the way over in probably right down in the middle of Stevens County in this picture. And for me to be able to see on one side, I can see the Kettle Crest, and on the other side, I can see Abercrombie Hooknose. We just have some of the most unbelievable views, some of the most unbelievable watersheds. And it's just something that I think is worth protecting for generations and all these, your user groups. It's something that personally I take a lot of consideration in because I speak quite a bit about my kids and their kids, because in reality, if we don't do this properly, then they're the ones that are holding this bag. And we have an opportunity to give them something that really, hopefully they can't screw up. That's kind of one of my goals and how I try to manage our business and grow our business, is that they're able to make their own mistakes, and the business is able to survive those mistakes, because without mistakes, you don't have the growth. So that's really how I plan our family-owned business. That's what I'm looking for. And I think that's a little bit about what New Heritage is all about, is how do we make it so that that the forest is healthy enough that it can withstand some of our past mistakes, as far as some of ecological forest management mistakes that were made in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and probably even into the early 90s, so that we're moving that needle and protecting those areas that need protecting. So I think that's what it's all about, making sure that all users have something forever.
I think, yeah, from a recreational standpoint too, you know, you can't predict, but you can sort of guess what's going to happen up here, and we got to get ahead of that. It's better to be ahead of it than catching up to it, and that's something that I've learned over the years. My father ran recreational equipment for 20 years, and so I grew up in the outdoor industry. And boy, as it spiked, not only in the last few years, but over time, generationally, it's pretty incredible, and it's not going to stop. We need these areas to recreate in, but we also need pristine habitat for big ungulates, for hunting, for fish. We need clean, cold water for fish. Fish are so important to the tribes, and you know, it's all connected. So I think we're getting a little bit circular here, Kurtis. I'm starting to repeat myself as usual, and let's open it up to questions. I would like to say we'll have some questions now, and then we could maybe let Kurtis and I close before everyone bails. So if there's any questions, you want to throw them at Kurtis?
I got a notepad, so I'm ready.
Just kidding. I'll take them too.
We got one in the
chat.
Go ahead, Gina.
Don Wallingford asks, when we think about the future, would the tribes be open and willing to encourage recreation?
Yeah,
that's a good question. Go ahead, Bobby. Go ahead and take that one.
I think that is a really good question. I know that on the reservation in particular, they feel fairly protective of the territory. I'm not going to speak for the tribes here, obviously, but the concept is they're going to help us write this, and it's going to be what they want. And I think that you know, we share. This is their traditional territory, has been for 10,000 years or 20, depending on where you start. And so, making their voice a priority in this thing and being amenable to what we all put together here is how it's going to have to be, I think, to a degree, especially near the border of the reservation. But I think that there's so much agreement from Kurtis and I's experience from the last 8 or 9 months of meeting with all these different folks. There's so much agreement, you know, that's what we focus on, and that's what we can hopefully distill into the new heritage. So it's kind of a broad answer. Kurtis, you want to make that any better?
Yeah, I'll dive into that one, and just because I'll probably get yelled at later anyways, but that's all right. I'm good at that. So we're talking about the Colville National Forest. Obviously, the tribes have those cultural heritage areas, which they would probably want to not have certain kind of recreation and or not have some recreation in those culturally sensitive areas. That's what I've heard, is there are areas that the tribe has known about that have been there for so long, and they kind of keep that close to their chest for multiple reasons. When people don't understand the heritage of what those sites really mean, you get a lot of either graffiti or defaming, and we've seen some of that. And I think a lot of that comes from people not understanding what it really means, and it looks to them like a cool spot. So I think that they will encourage recreation. It'll just be kind of a tactful situation where some recreation in some areas and not in others that kind of go through their cultural sensitive history. So we're kind of trying to navigate through an old school tribal territory, and not just with one tribe. I mean, the Colvilles are 12 confederated tribes. So to get agreement on what's what and what's where, that's a tough one. So I think this is something that it could take some time, but I think they would definitely be helpful in encouraging recreational activities on the north half is what they call it.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that also, they also retain hunting and fishing rights by treaty up on the north half and other parts of the Colorado National Forest. We want to protect those or maybe even expand on them. I think that we're trying to make this additive for the tribes and not restrictive. That's the concept, I think. And also not make it diminish what we already have. Just kind of secure that or make assurances. Any other questions? I think we're lucky. Gina's got everyone muted, I think. Is anyone still there?
What other interest do you guys represent? I know I see some conservation voices in the audience, but yeah, feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question if you want. Just curious about what other interests do you guys represent?
It's okay if we've been so thorough that no one has a question too. Oops, there's someone.
All right, I can ask this. One moment. From Will Robertson, has there been talk about additional rail banking, for example, between Kettle Falls and Laurier or South Abilene Falls, or is the focus on improving the current rail trail?
Has someone hacked my email? Just kidding. So this is a rail trail question, but
yeah, that may have been me hacking your email.
Thanks,
yeah.
Will. So as a Ferry County Rail Trail Partners president, I could say a portion of this rail line that you're talking about does go through the Colville National Forest. One thing is pretty important. We want to focus on the Colville National Forest here with this legislation and make that our attainable goal, achievable goal, so we don't get mission creep and start going all over the place and fail. So there is a small portion of the rail line you're talking about that goes through the Colville National Forest. It's also next to the Kettle River. It's a part where the National Forest touches the Kettle River. And actually in the forest plan, it was designated as recreational, or it was recommended recreational river, which is, I guess, a notch below wild and scenic river. But that's exciting. It touches the Kettle River. It touches that rail corridor. The Ferry County rail corridor is over on the west side of the Kettle Mountains, of the Kettle Crest. And the section that Will is talking about is on the east side. It wraps, if you will, like an upside down. The rail line goes from Republic to Canada and then goes along the Kettle River and back into the US. Well, the part that goes back into the US down to Kettle Falls, or Noisy Waters as the tribes call it, is still active, but it's kind of hanging by a thread. I've heard reports that it's going to be abandoned, which is the technical term, by the rail company. But it's just rumors right now. I've been hearing those rumors for 15 years. My gut tells me something like that could very well happen. No one wants their rail service to go away. It's for the economy of Grand Forks and everyone else involved. But if it happens, we have attorneys that would try to help us rail bank that line and preserve it as a trail. And that's sort of make lemonade out of lemons. No one wants our rail service to go away. So that would be a good thing to preserve that rail corridor. So everyone, it's a good question. Keep your ears peeled. I think that if you could imagine a big, huge international rail trail that hugs the Kettle Range, it could be pretty cool.
There's another question in the chat, and Gina, I think part of this is going to be to you is, I think we need the link on how these folks can reach out to us, because our ask, the question is, what's the ask to us?
Yeah.
What are we asking you guys to do? And I think I probably missed that in my rambling of what Bobby and I thought was going to be a 15 to 20 minute pub talk, because we get nervous, don't know how much we're going to speak over each other.
Well, you do. I did say let us close the question and answer session. So that's where you're set up for the ask. Here we go.
Absolutely. I think it's a perfect segue into reach out to that that email that Gina just put in the chat box. And we want to hear from you what interests you have and who you represent and areas that you're interested in, or if there's not an area that you're interested in, what you're interested in, so we could potentially create an area. That everything's on the table at this point. So just more information. The more information we have, the better this project looks. And we're just excited to kind of advocate for everybody is kind of what we're trying to do.
That's perfect. And I don't know the protocols here with the email addresses or how people signed up, but I think that I've asked Gina if we could we have a outreach document about New Heritage. It's evolving, it's a living document. But I think we can send it out to everybody who's in this pub talk. Gina, let us know if that's possible. Also, hopefully we can add your names. Great, she's gonna send it out. Hopefully we can add your names to an email list and give you updates about the New Heritage concept as it evolves and we start picking up speed. We are at the very beginning here. I know I said we've been talking to members of the tribes for 9 months, but that's nothing. We got a lot of work to do here and it's pretty exciting. Don't you have something quotable for us, Kurtis, like the end, something exciting, motivating?
I could probably come up with something, but I don't know if it'd be exciting. I'm just honestly, I think Bobby and I we get kind of wrapped up in the weeds with some of our work that we're doing with NUFIC. And this to us is fun. This is like outreach and it's new, exciting. Like I said in the beginning, it's shiny. This is an opportunity for all user groups to get something together and everybody to get something. So this is Northeast Washington is absolutely unbelievable. If you guys haven't spent much time up here, please do. But that's how we teach teach people to be respectful. So that's part of this as well. It's going to be a lot of signage, information, so people know where they're at when they're there and what was there before and what the significance of that area is. Like I said, I get to cheat because I've been here my whole life. And I get to teach that to my kids, but I see a lot of my kids' friends and they don't have that same cheat code where their dad can take them anywhere on the Colville National Forest and give them a history lesson. So I would like every kid anywhere that can get their parents to take them or their custodial, whatever, to get them into the forest and attach these kids to nature, because we all know that the more exposure kids have to just the natural portion of life, it's just so fulfilling and can really shape everything that they do from then on. Otherwise, we're going to have these kids with these phones attached to their ears and their face for the rest of their life.
My dad always said, one of his missions at REI, working in the outdoor retail industry, he got excited and started promoting outdoor recreation. He said for people to care about the environment or the natural world, they've got to fall in love with it. They got to go see it. And that is, that's through, what he did through recreation. That was his form of advocacy. And, there's a lot of trailheads in the Colville National Forest that there's no signage, there's no parking lots, but we're trying to do better with these retained receipts. But it takes public input. The Forest Service love public input. Your legislators, your congressmen love public input, and that is what this is. We want to take it up a notch. They got to hear from us, and that is you. Us is you. Okay, I'm sick of looking at Kurtis's face and hearing me babble. So, is there anything else for the good of the order here?
Thank you for the nice comments in the chat.
Yeah, and hopefully when this pandemic eases off a little bit in the spring and summer, we can meet all y'all in a real pub.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you guys so much for attending. If you want to, if you're not already on the email list, I just sent out the winter newsletter, and I think you guys might have heard about this from that. But if you're not on it, then just contact the email address that I put in the chat, the newfickinfo@gmail.com, and we can add you to that. There's also a New Heritage website that I put in the chat, but it's kind of just we haven't done that much with it yet. So it's basically just a contact list at this point. So, but feel free to visit. And stay tuned for further events. We're going to be having a 20-year anniversary celebration event, 20 years of collaboration between NUFIC and the Forest Service. So that will be coming up in May or June, most likely. So stay tuned for that. And also this recording will be on the website. It's at newforestcoalition.com. So look for that there. And thank you guys so much. And I hope you
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
See you out on the trail. Bye-bye.
Bye. Good job.